The summons. The Crethean Empire's war fleet cast shadows across a dozen star systems. Their obsidian warships, each the size of a small moon, had conquered 73 civilizations in 2 centuries. When their transmission reached Earth's Galactic Affairs Office, every species in the known galaxy held their breath. Mira Castellano read the message 3 times, her coffee growing cold on her desk in Geneva. As Senior Financial Compliance Officer for the Terran Diplomatic Corps, she'd expected many things when humanity joined the galactic community 5 years ago. A formal audit request from the most feared empire in the galaxy wasn't one of them. They want what? Her supervisor, Director Qin Zhao, leaned over her shoulder, his reflection ghostly in her monitor. A financial audit of their military expenditures. They're applying for a seat on the Galactic Economic Council, and apparently it's required. Mira highlighted the relevant clause. Section 447B. Any entity controlling more than 15% of galactic military assets must submit to independent financial review. Qin laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. The Cretheans conquered the Vaxilor in 3 days. They glassed the Meridian colonies for refusing tribute. And they want us to audit them. Apparently we're the only species they'll accept. Mira scrolled to the addendum. It says here that humanity's reputation for obsessive numerical precision and bureaucratic inflexibility makes us the only acceptable choice. That's either a compliment or an insult. With the Cretheans? Probably both. The message continued with coordinates, security protocols, and a timeline that made Myra's stomach clench. They had 6 weeks to conduct a comprehensive audit of an empire that spanned 42 systems. 6 weeks to examine the finances of a civilization that had casually exterminated species for looking at them wrong. You're not seriously considering this, Qin said. Mira pulled up her personnel file, scrolling through her credentials. Certified Galactic Accountant, 15 years with the IRS, 3 years investigating transnational corporate fraud. She'd found discrepancies in quantum trading algorithms and untangled the finances of AI corporations. But this? If we refuse, the Cretheans don't get their council seat, she said slowly. If they don't get their seat, they've publicly stated they'll consider it an act of economic warfare. And if you go and find something they don't like? That was the question, wasn't it? The Crethean Emperor Vextheron the Merciless hadn't earned his title through patience or forgiveness. His response to the Hellion Accords had been to vaporize the planet where they were signed. Then I'd better be very thorough. Mira began composing her team request. I'll need Nash Okoye from Forensic Accounting, Zara Curry from our Xenofinance Division, and someone who actually understands quantum military economics. You're insane. I'm a CPA. We're all a little insane. She hit send on her team request. Besides, someone has to do it. Every species in the galaxy is terrified of the Cretheans because of their military power. But military power runs on resources, and resources require budgets. You want to know how dangerous they really are? Follow the money. Qin was quiet for a moment. You really think you can find something? I think that no empire in history has ever sustained that level of military expansion without some serious financial engineering. The question isn't whether there are problems, it's how big they are and whether the Cretheans know about them. 3 days later, Mira stood in the departure bay of Geneva's orbital station with her team of 5. Nash Okoye, tall and methodical, was already reviewing preliminary data on his tablet. Zara Curry, whose grandparents had fled financial collapse in old Lebanon, examined the quantum encryption keys they'd been provided. Beside them stood Raj Patel, the foremost expert on alien military economics, and twins Sven and Ingrid Larsen, data analysts who could find patterns in chaos. Everyone understands the stakes? Mira asked. We're auditing the galactic equivalent of the Mongol Empire, Raj said cheerfully. What could go wrong? They could kill us, Ingrid pointed out. They could try, Sven added. But we have something they need, legitimacy. The council won't accept their application without our certification. And if we refuse to certify? Zara asked. Mira shouldered her bag of hard drives and audit equipment. Then we'd better have ironclad evidence to back up our refusal. The kind of evidence that even the Cretheans can't argue with. The transport ship, a sleek Terran diplomatic vessel, hummed to life. Through the viewport, the stars beckoned, and somewhere among them, the Crethean Empire waited. As they accelerated toward the first jump gate, Nash looked up from his tablet. I've been analyzing their published military budget. It's interesting. Interesting how? Interesting as in, according to these numbers, they should have gone bankrupt 3 decades ago. Mira smiled grimly. then I'd say we have our work cut out for us. The ship jumped and Earth disappeared behind them. The dreadnought. The Crethean dreadnought Eternal Subjugation was less a ship and more a floating city of weaponized paranoia. Myra's team materialized in the transport bay after what felt like having their atoms sifted through a sieve. The security scan alone had taken 40 minutes. A towering Crethean officer waited for them, his chitinous armor gleaming black and crimson. His face, if you could call it that, resembled a mantis that had decided to evolve nightmares as a defense mechanism. I am War Tactician Zekrith. His voice came through a translator with an unsettling rasp. You will follow protocols. You will not enter restricted zones. You will complete your audit in the allotted time. 42 days to audit a galactic empire, Mira said pleasantly. Seems generous. Zekrith's mandibles clicked. Laughter or threat, the database wasn't clear. The Emperor believes you will find our finances exemplary. Their quarters were surprisingly comfortable, though the walls pulsed with a faint bioluminescence that made Ingrid nauseous. Sven immediately swept for surveillance devices and found 73. Should we disable them? He whispered. No, Mira said. Let them watch. We're not doing anything wrong. Yet, Nash muttered, spreading his preliminary analysis across the conference table they'd assembled. Look at this. The Cretheans claim military expenditures of 14 trillion galactic credits annually. But their conquered territories only generate 8 trillion in tribute and taxation. 6 trillion deficit, Raj noted. How are they covering it? Zara pulled up resource manifests. They're not. Or rather, they're using creative accounting. See these entries? Strategic military depreciation, future conquest revenue amortization, probabilistic tribute projections. They're booking revenue from planets they haven't conquered yet, Ingrid breathed. And depreciating their warships as if they'll last forever, Sven added. But warships don't last forever. These things have operational lifespans. Mira felt the first stirrings of understanding. Pull up their fleet maintenance budgets. Nash's fingers flew across his interface. Here. Annual fleet maintenance, 400 billion credits. For 3,000 capital ships? Raj did the math in his head. That's nothing. That's not enough to keep a single dreadnought operational for a year, let alone 3,000. So either they've discovered magic, Zara said, or their fleet is falling apart and no one knows it. A chime interrupted them. Zekrith's hologram appeared, mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. The Emperor will grant you an audience. You will report your preliminary findings. The throne room was designed to intimidate. The ceiling soared into darkness punctuated by the glow of captured stars, actual stars, imprisoned in stasis fields as trophies. Emperor Vextheron sat on a throne constructed from the hull of the last Helion battleship, his 4 arms resting on armrests carved from crystallized temporal energy. Humans. His voice needed no translator, rumbling through the air like distant thunder. You have examined our empire's finances for 3 days. What have you found? Mira stepped forward, her tablet clutched like a shield. Your Eminence, we've identified several areas requiring deeper investigation. Speak plainly. Your military expenditures exceed your revenue by 6 trillion credits annually. Your maintenance budgets are insufficient for your fleet size by a factor of 30. And your future revenue projections are based on conquest success rates that exceed historical precedent by 400%. The throne room went silent. Zekrith's translator emitted a sound like breaking glass. In the shadows, other Crethean officials shifted, their armor scraping. Then Vextheron laughed, a sound like continents cracking. You are the first to notice, he said. Every other species sees our fleets and assumes wealth. They see our conquered worlds and imagine infinite resources. But you humans, you look at numbers and see truth. Then you acknowledge the discrepancies? Mira asked. I acknowledge that our empire operates on principles that other species find unconventional. Vextheron rose, his shadow engulfing them. You will continue your audit. You will document everything. And when you are finished, you will understand why we requested you specifically. And if our final report recommends against council membership? The Emperor's eyes, all 6 of them, fixed on her. Then you will have succeeded where 73 civilizations have failed. You will have conquered the Crethean Empire not with weapons but with truth. He gestured dismissal. War Tactician Zekrith will provide full access to our financial systems. All of them. Even the classified ones. As they left the throne room, Nash whispered, Did he just give us permission to find out how to destroy his empire? Not destroy, Mira corrected. Understand. There's a difference. Back in their quarters, Zara pulled up the newly accessible files. Her face went pale. Oh gods. What is it? The maintenance budget. They're not maintaining their fleet normally. They're using conquered populations as slave labor. Billions of them. And they're not depreciating the slaves because they classify them as renewable resources. Raj's voice was hollow. That's not creative accounting. That's horror. It's both, Mira said grimly. And it's exactly what we need to document. Every detail. Every number. Every crime hidden in balance sheets. Ingrid looked up from her analysis. If we report this, if we certify their finances as unsustainable and built on atrocities, the council will reject them. And then? Sven asked. And then we find out if the emperor meant what he said about being conquered by truth. Outside their viewport, a Crethean patrol fleet drifted past, 300 warships in perfect formation. Somewhere inside those ships, Mira knew, were the numbers that would tell the real story. She opened a new audit file. Let's find out how deep this goes. The hidden ledgers. The quantum servers hummed in the sublevels of eternal subjugation, processing data streams from 42 systems simultaneously. Zekrith had granted them access, but he'd neglected to mention the sheer volume of information. It's like they designed this system to make auditing impossible, Nash groaned, scrolling through his 87th procurement database. Different formats, different currencies, half of it encrypted with quantum keys that rotate every nanosecond. That's intentional, Zara said, her eyes reflecting cascading numbers. Classic obfuscation technique. Bury the truth under complexity. But the Larson twins thrived in complexity. Sven had written an algorithm that cross-referenced procurement orders with delivery confirmations. Ingrid had mapped financial flows across all conquered territories. Together, they were building a picture of the Empire's true economic structure. Found something, Sven announced on day 7. Supply chain discrepancies. The Empire orders quantum cores for their dreadnoughts from the Vaxcyler foundries, or what's left of them. 50,000 cores annually. Okay, Mira said. What's the problem? Each dreadnought needs 12 cores. The Empire has 3,000 dreadnoughts. That's 36,000 cores just for replacement. The foundries can only produce 45,000 cores annually, which means they should have 9,000 cores left over. Should have. Ingrid pulled up a secondary ledger. Except the foundries are reporting production of 90,000 cores. Double what they're physically capable of producing. Someone's cooking the books, Nash said. But who? Raj had been quiet, studying fleet deployment records. Now he looked up, his face grim. Pull up the maintenance schedules for dreadnoughts assigned to the Helion sector. The data materialized in holographic form. Myra's breath caught. These ships haven't had core replacements in 15 years. That's impossible. Quantum cores degrade. After 10 years they become unstable. After 15. She trailed off, understanding dawning. After 15 they fail catastrophically, Raj finished. These ships are flying time bombs. Zara cross-referenced the falsified core production with financial transfers. The foundry supervisors are reporting ghost production and pocketing the difference. They're embezzling from the Empire's military budget. But someone higher up has to know, these discrepancies are massive. A chime echoed through their quarters. Zekrith's hologram appeared, but his usual rigid posture was slightly slouched. The Emperor requests an interim briefing. Tomorrow at the 6th hour. We'll be ready, Mira said. After he vanished, Nash voiced what they were all thinking. Do we tell him that his fleet is falling apart? We have to, Mira said. That's our job. Our job is to survive this, Ingrid countered. If we tell an emperor built on fear that his empire is rotting from within, what do you think he'll do? He asked for truth, Mira said. We're going to give it to him. But that night, sleep eluded her. She wandered the dreadnought's observation deck, staring at the conquered Vaxcyler homeworld below. Once it had been a thriving civilization. Now its surface glowed with the heat of foundries, producing weapons for the empire that had destroyed it. You cannot sleep either. Mira spun. A Crethean stood in the shadows, smaller than Zekrith, her armor decorated with symbols Mira didn't recognize. I am Archiver Shixanael, the alien said. I maintain the Empire's historical records. I am not supposed to speak with you, but... She hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. But I must. Why? Because you are finding what I have known for decades. Our empire is collapsing. Not from external threats but from internal decay. Corruption. Incompetence. The mathematics of unsustainable expansion. She produced a data crystal. This contains the true budget. Not the one presented to the emperor, but the one compiled by myself and others who still believe in truth. It shows that 60% of our military expenditure is lost to graft, waste, and fraud. It shows that our conquered populations are dying faster than we can replace them. It shows that our legendary fleet is largely non-operational. Mira took the crystal carefully. Why give this to me? Because the emperor knows, Shixanel said quietly. He has always known. But he cannot act without proof from an external source. If he purged the corruption based on internal reports, the military would fracture. Civil war would destroy us faster than any enemy. But if humans, neutral, respected for your financial integrity, present evidence. He can act without appearing weak, Mira finished. We're not just auditing. We're providing political cover. You are providing salvation. Or damnation. I am not certain which. The archiver melted back into shadows, leaving Mira alone with a data crystal that contained the death certificate of a galactic empire. The next day in the throne room, Mira presented their interim findings. She watched Vextheron's face, all 6 eyes fixed on the holographic displays of embezzlement, fraud, and systematic failure. When she finished, silence stretched like a blade. Continue, the emperor said finally. Find it all. Every lie. Every thief. Every incompetent fool who has built my empire on sand. Your Eminence, Zekrith interjected. Perhaps the humans have seen enough. They have seen nothing yet. Vextheron's voice could have shattered planets. War tactician, you will provide them access to the military command structure's personal finances. All of it. Zekrith's armor plates rattled. Your Eminence, I must protest. Your protest is noted. Humans, you have 35 days remaining. I expect a complete accounting of who has stolen from this empire. Names. Amounts. Evidence. As they left, Raj whispered, we're not auditors anymore. We're executioners. No, Mira corrected, thinking of Shixanel's crystal burning in her pocket. We're coroners. We're just documenting how the patient died. And if we're thorough? Then maybe we can tell them how to live. The conspiracy unveiled. The military command structure's personal finances read like a masterclass in creative theft. Admiral Kreshvor owned estates on 12 conquered worlds, purchased with victory bonuses that somehow exceeded the GDP of entire planets. General Thexalone's family trust held shares in the very weapons manufacturers supplying the fleet, a conflict of interest so blatant it made Myra's teeth ache. They're not even hiding it well, Nash said incredulous. This is amateur-hour corruption. How has no one noticed? Someone did, Zara said, pulling up execution records. Auditor General Vexnim, Compliance Officer Shekral, Inspector Thixvor, all executed for treason in the last decade. They noticed. They tried to report it. They died. The pattern was clear and chilling. Every internal reformer, every officer who questioned the budget, every administrator who suggested efficiency, eliminated. Not by the emperor, but by the very corruption they tried to expose. Sven and Ingrid had mapped the financial networks. It's a conspiracy, Sven said, manipulating the holographic web of connections. See? Admiral Kreshvor's estates are managed by companies owned by General Thexalone's brother. Those companies purchase supplies from manufacturers partly owned by war tactician Zekrith's clan. The money flows in circles, concentrating wealth while the empire bleeds resources. And the emperor? Mira asked. Either he's in on it, Ingrid said, or he's the most carefully insulated leader in galactic history. Every report he receives is filtered through these officers. Every audit is conducted by their appointees. He sees only what they want him to see. Until now, Mira thought. They'd requested our audit because we can't be bought or intimidated by his subordinates. Raj had been analyzing fleet deployments against the financial records. I found something worse. The Third Fleet, 200 dreadnoughts assigned to deep space patrol, in the outer reaches. They're listed as fully operational, costing 300 billion credits annually in support. Let me guess, Nash said. They don't exist? Oh, they exist. But they haven't moved in 8 years. They're hulks, stripped for parts to keep the other fleets running. But on paper they're receiving supplies, fuel, ammunition. Someone's been pocketing that 300 billion for 8 years. That's 2.4 trillion credits, Zara calculated. That's enough to fund a revolution. A soft chime. Not Zekrith this time, A priority message from the archiver. They know you're close. The conspirators are meeting tonight. Coordinates attached. You can observe if you're careful. It's a trap, Ingrid said immediately. Or it's the evidence we need, Mira countered. Nash, Raj, you're with me. Zara, Sven, Ingrid, keep working the financials. If we don't come back, send everything we've found to the Emperor directly. The maintenance tunnels beneath the dreadnought smelled of ozone and old fear. Mira followed Shiksenael's directions, Nash and Raj close behind. The tunnel opened into an observation gallery overlooking a command chamber. Below, 12 high-ranking Crethean officers stood in a circle. Mira recognized 8 of them from her audit. The wealthiest. The most corrupt. The humans have found the Third Fleet discrepancy, Admiral Kreshvor hissed. It's only a matter of time before they trace it to us. Then we eliminate them, General Thexalone said. An unfortunate accident. The Emperor will mourn the loss of his auditors and request new ones we can control. No. War tactician Zekrith spoke and Myra's stomach dropped. Killing them proves their findings. The Emperor specifically requested humans because they cannot be bribed or intimidated. Their deaths would validate everything they've discovered. Then what do you propose? Another officer demanded. Zekrith's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. We give them a scapegoat. Sacrifice one of our own, someone expendable. Feed the humans evidence of isolated corruption. Let them feel they've completed their audit. They certify our finances with minor concerns. We execute our scapegoat publicly and continue as before. And if they dig deeper? They won't. Humans love happy endings. Give them one corrupt official to blame, show them we're taking corrective action, and they'll return to Earth satisfied. Myra's recorder captured every word, every admission, every casual plan for deception. Beside her, Nash's face was white with rage. Raj simply shook his head, mouthing the word evidence. They retreated through the maintenance tunnels, not speaking until they reached their quarters. Only then did Mira check the recording, perfectly clear, fully authenticated, legally admissible in any galactic court. We have them, Nash breathed. We have proof of a conspiracy to defraud the Emperor and steal from the Empire, Mira corrected. But we don't have proof the Emperor isn't part of it. Zara looked up from her console. Actually, we might. I've been tracing the Emperor's personal accounts. They're remarkably modest. He takes no salary beyond the traditional stipend. His personal holdings are minimal. Either he's the galaxy's best money launderer, or he actually has no idea his empire is being looted. There's one way to find out, Mira said, pulling up the private communication channel Vex Theron had given her, for emergencies only. This qualifies as an emergency. She sent the message, Your Eminence. We have evidence of systematic fraud at the highest levels of your military command. Request private audience. Urgent. The response came in seconds. Granted. Come now. Come alone. Absolutely not, Nash said. If it's a trap. Then you'll have all the evidence to finish the audit without me. Mira stood, smoothing her suit. But I don't think it is. I think we're about to find out if the most feared emperor in the galaxy is really a prisoner of his own bureaucracy. She walked toward the throne room, her tablet full of evidence, her recorder full of confessions, and her mind full of calculations about what happens when you tell an emperor that his empire has been stolen from beneath him. The throne room was empty except for Vex Theron, sitting not on his trophy throne but on a simple bench, looking very old and very tired. Show me, he said quietly. Mira showed him everything. The Emperor's Gambit. Vex Theron watched in silence as Mira presented her findings. The falsified production records. The phantom fleets. The conspiracy recording. 2 hours of evidence, distilled from hundreds of hours of investigation. When she finished, the Emperor stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, his empire glittered, 42 systems, 1,000 worlds, the accumulated conquest of 2 centuries. Do you know why I conquered the Helion Accords? He asked softly. Mira said nothing. They were a democracy. 12 species, all voting on every decision. They were peaceful, prosperous, and utterly incapable of defending themselves. I destroyed them in 3 days. He turned and his 6 eyes held something Mira hadn't expected, regret. I told myself it was necessary. That the galaxy needed order. That democracy was weakness. And now I discover that my hierarchy, my perfect, efficient military order, is a fiction. My officers have created their own democracy. A democracy of thieves, voting with stolen credits on how to carve up my empire. He returned to his throne, suddenly looking every one of his 200 years. I built this empire on fear. I made myself a monster so terrible that entire civilizations would surrender rather than face me. And somewhere along the way, my own people learned to fear me so much they couldn't tell me the truth. They killed anyone who tried, Mira said. I know. I've been reviewing the execution records you sent. Vexnim, Chikro, Thix 4. Each one died for trying to save the empire I was too blind to see was dying. So what now? Mira asked. We're 28 days from our final report. The Galactic Council is waiting. Your conspirators are planning to frame someone else. And your empire is still bleeding resources it can't afford to lose. Vex Theron's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. Now we give them what they want. Your Eminence? My military command expects you to find a scapegoat. So we'll give them one. Someone high-ranking enough to be believable, guilty enough to be prosecuted, but ultimately, insufficient. You want us to lie? I want you to be strategic with the truth. He pulled up a holographic display. Logistics Marshal Vren Thor. Guilty of embezzlement, 20 billion credits over 10 years. Substantial but not part of the main conspiracy. He's arrogant, unpopular, and stupid enough to have left an obvious trail. You want us to focus on him in our interim report, Mira said, understanding. Make the conspirators think their plan worked. While you continue the real investigation in secret. 28 days is insufficient to untangle 2 centuries of corruption. But if the conspirators believe they're safe, they'll relax. Make mistakes. And you'll have time to build an ironclad case. And then? Then you present your final report to the Galactic Council, with me in attendance. You detail every crime, every theft, every officer who chose wealth over duty. You recommend against our council membership. Mira blinked. You want us to fail you? I want you to expose the truth. The council will reject our application. My military command will be humiliated in front of the entire galaxy. And I will have the political capital to do what I should have done decades ago, purge the rot from my empire. That's a coup, Nash said from the doorway. Mira spun. How long had he been listening? That's justice, Vex Theron corrected. I cannot reform my empire from within. The corruption is too deep, too entrenched. But I can allow outsiders to document it so thoroughly that even my most loyal officers cannot deny the need for change. You're weaponizing our audit, Mira said. I'm using your integrity as a mirror. To show my empire what it has become. He stood. Will you help me? Mira looked at Nash, who shrugged. We're auditors. We find the truth. What happens with that truth isn't really our department. Except it is, Raj said, entering with the others. We're not just finding numbers. We're determining the fate of billions of people in the Empire's slave labor camps. If exposing this corruption leads to reform, to freedom, or civil war, Ingrid pointed out. If the military fractures, the Empire could tear itself apart. The power vacuum would destabilize the entire galactic arm. Which is why, Vex Theron said, the exposure must be precise. Targeted. Not all my officers are corrupt. Many are loyal, competent, honorable. Your audit must separate the guilty from the innocent. Give me the evidence I need to remove the cancer without killing the patient. Zara pulled up her financial networks. We can do that. Tag every officer with a corruption index based on their financial irregularities. Green for clean, yellow for minor issues, red for major crimes. Create a hierarchy of guilt, Sven added. The council sees the systematic nature of the fraud. The Emperor gets a roadmap for reform. And the conspirators? Mira asked. Vex Theron's eyes gleamed. The conspirators will receive exactly what they deserve. But first we must ensure they don't suspect. So tomorrow, you will present your interim finding. Logistics Marshal Vren Thor is guilty of embezzlement and will face immediate trial. And the 27 days after that? You work in secret. I'll assign Archiver Shixanael as your liaison. She has access to records even my military command doesn't know exist. Build me a case so complete that not even the most corrupt admiral can argue against reform. Mira considered the Emperor before her. A conqueror, a tyrant, a mass murderer by any objective standard. But also, perhaps, a leader who'd realized his empire was built on lies and was willing to burn it down to rebuild it honestly. We'll need guarantees, she said. Protection for whistleblowers like Shixanael. Amnesty for lower-level participants who cooperate. And a commitment to actual reform, not just replacing one set of corrupt officers with another. You'll have it. All of it. In writing, broadcast to the entire empire. Then we have a deal. As they left the throne room, Nash whispered, "Did we just agree to help a tyrant consolidate power?" "We agreed to expose corruption," Mira said. "What happens after is politics. We're accountants, remember? Accountants who might accidentally trigger a revolution. Then we'd better make sure our numbers are perfect." Back in their quarters, they began preparing two reports. The public one exposing Vrenthor's relatively minor crimes, and the real one, documenting the systematic looting of an empire. Outside, the Crethean Empire continued its slow collapse, unaware that a team of human accountants had just become the most dangerous force in 42 systems. One number at a time. The perfect case. 27 days became a blur of data, coffee, and paranoia. Shixanel proved invaluable, guiding them through archives that predated Vextheron's reign. The corruption they discovered went back generations, a metastasizing cancer that had grown with the empire itself. The second fleet procurement scandal of 2287, Shixanel said, pulling up records from 70 years prior. Admiral Krexthon ordered 10,000 fighter craft. Only 6,000 were delivered. The remaining 4,000 existed only on paper, but their maintenance costs were paid out for decades. "Let me guess," Zara said tiredly. "The payments went to shell corporations owned by the Admiral's family. His grandchildren still receive dividends. They developed a system." Sven and Ingrid mapped the financial flows, creating a visual web of corruption that looked like a spider's nightmare. Raj cross-referenced military deployments against resource consumption, finding fleets that couldn't possibly be operational based on their supply lines. Nash dug into individual officer finances, building psychological profiles of the corrupt. Those who stole from greed versus those who stole from desperation. Zara, meanwhile, had discovered something extraordinary. "The slaves," she said on day 15, her voice hollow. "They're not just labor. They're the economic foundation of everything." Mira looked up from a particularly creative bit of money laundering. "Explain." "The empire conquers worlds, enslaves populations, and uses them as free labor in mines, foundries, shipyards. This labor is valued at zero on the books. They're renewable resources, remember? But if we calculated the actual economic value of their work at market rates..." She pulled up her calculations. Myra's breath caught. 15 trillion credits annually, Zara continued. "That's the real number. The empire doesn't make money from conquest, it makes money from slavery. And when the slave populations die out, as they're doing because of overwork and malnutrition, the entire economic model collapses." "How long until total collapse?" Mira asked. "At current mortality rates? 8 years. Maybe 10. The empire is literally working its economic foundation to death." Raj leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "So the corruption isn't just theft. It's accelerating the empire's collapse. The corrupt officers are taking resources that should go to maintaining the slave populations. Without those resources, the slaves die faster. Without the slaves, there's no free labor. Without free labor, the military budget can't sustain the fleet. Without the fleet, the empire falls," Nash finished. "And every species they've conquered rises up. The Crethians will be lucky if they're only scattered. More likely they'll be exterminated." Shixanel's translator emitted a sound like broken glass, laughter. "Do you know what the conspiracy calls their scheme? Optimizing sunset operations. They're looting the empire because they know it's dying. They're just trying to get rich before the end." "That's not optimization," Mira said coldly. "That's murder-suicide." On day 20, Logistics Marshal Vrenthor was tried, convicted, and executed, a public spectacle broadcast empire-wide. The human auditors were praised for their thoroughness. The conspirators congratulated themselves on a successful misdirection. And in their quarters, Myra's team continued building their real case. "We need more than numbers," Mira said on day 23. "We need human stories. Or Crethean stories. Whatever. We need the council to understand this isn't just fraud, it's systematic destruction of an empire and genocide of conquered peoples." Shixanel hesitated. "There are records. Testimony from before certain witnesses were eliminated. Would that suffice?" The testimony was devastating. A Vaxcyler engineer describing how production quotas were mathematically impossible, but failure meant execution. A Halion doctor documenting the exact moment he realized his medical supplies were being diverted and his patients would die. A Meridian child asking why she was so hungry when the empire was so wealthy. "Include all of it," Mira said, her voice shaking. "Every word. Every number. Make it impossible to look away." On day 26, they compiled their final report. It ran to 3,000 pages with another 10,000 pages of supporting documentation. It detailed 847 corrupt officers by name, with specific crimes and stolen amounts, the systematic falsification of production records across 200 years, the creation and maintenance of 23 phantom fleets, totaling 1,500 non-existent ships, the diversion of 45 trillion credits from military operations to personal enrichment, the deliberate starvation of slave populations to maximize short-term profits, the imminent economic collapse of the entire empire within a decade. And it included recommendations. Immediate prosecution of all named officers, comprehensive audit of all military assets, reclassification of enslaved populations as sentient beings with economic value, mandatory resource allocation to maintain workforce health, constitutional reforms limiting military command, financial autonomy, rejection of Crethean Empire, application to Galactic Economic Council pending reforms. It's perfect, Nash said quietly. And it's going to get us killed. Maybe, Mira agreed. Or maybe it saves an empire. Why do we care about saving them? Ingrid asked. They're monsters. Let them collapse. Because collapse means chaos, Raj said. 42 systems, 1,000 worlds, billions of people, slave and free, all thrown into civil war and economic devastation. The death toll would be incalculable. And because, Mira added, somewhere in this empire are people like Shix and Ael. People who tried to do the right thing and were silenced. If our audit gives them a voice, gives them a chance to reform from within. Then we haven't just exposed corruption, Zara finished. We've planted the seeds of revolution. On day 27, they presented their preliminary final report to Emperor Vex Theron. He read it in silence, his 6 eyes scanning page after page of documented crimes. This will destroy my military command, he said finally. Yes. It will humiliate my empire before the entire galaxy. Yes. It will likely trigger civil conflict, possibly civil war. Possibly. He looked up at her. It is the most thorough, damning, and important document in the history of my empire. You have my gratitude and my terror in equal measure. What will you do with it? Exactly what we agreed. Tomorrow you present this to the Galactic Council. I will be there to accept their judgment. And then. He paused. And then we discover if an empire built on fear can transform into something built on truth. And if it can't? Then at least the galaxy will know how we really died. Not conquered by enemies, but consumed by our own corruption. Mira extended her hand, a human gesture. After a moment, Vex Theron clasped it with one of his 4 hands. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, you asked for the truth. We gave it to you. I know. That's what terrifies me. That night, as her team made final preparations, Mira stood at the viewport, watching the conquered worlds below. Tomorrow everything changed. For better or worse, the Crethean Empire would never be the same. She just hoped the galaxy survived what came next. The reckoning. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to humble. Representatives from 200 civilizations occupied ascending tiers, their collective presence a reminder that no single species, however powerful, ruled alone. The human delegation sat in the newcomers section, their 5 years of membership marked by modest seating near the rear. But today all eyes were on the floor, where Mira Castellano stood beside Emperor Vex Theron the Merciless. This council convenes to review the application of the Crethean Empire for membership in the Galactic Economic Council, Chancellor Vorin of the Nexus Alliance announced. Her crystalline form refracted light across the chamber. The human auditors will present their findings. Mira activated the holographic display. The 3,000-page report materialized, rotating slowly above the assembly. Honorable Chancellor, esteemed representatives, I present the complete financial audit of the Crethean Empire. Her voice echoed in the vast chamber. Our investigation covered 200 years of financial records, 42 systems, and 3,000 interviews. Our findings are comprehensive. She began with the numbers. The phantom fleets. The falsified production. The embezzlement so vast it had its own gravitational pull. The council listened in growing horror as she detailed how an empire that terrified the galaxy was actually bankrupt, sustained only by accounting fraud and slavery. Then she showed them the testimony. A vaxilar mother, her voice breaking as she described watching her children starve while food shipments were diverted and sold by corrupt officers. A Helion engineer, executed for reporting that the state-of-the-art weapons facility was actually falling apart. A Meridian teacher whose school was closed to convert the children into factory workers. The chamber was silent. Our recommendation, Mira concluded, is that the Cretan Empire's application be rejected pending comprehensive reforms. Furthermore, we recommend that the Council establish oversight mechanisms to monitor the Empire's implementation of anti-corruption measures and gradual emancipation of enslaved populations. This is outrageous. Admiral Kreshvor's hologram appeared from the Cretan delegation. These humans have slandered the Empire with lies and... Silence. Vextheron's voice cut through the chamber. The Admiral's hologram flickered and died. The Emperor rose, his forearms spread in a gesture of surrender. Everything they have said is true, he announced. Every number. Every crime. Every horror. I requested this audit because I knew my empire was corrupt. I did not know how deep the rot went until these humans showed me. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. I have ruled through fear for 2 centuries, Vextheron continued. I believed strength meant crushing opposition. I believed efficiency meant centralized control. I was wrong. I created an empire so terrifying that my own people feared to tell me the truth. And in that silence, corruption festered. He gestured to the report. These humans did what none of my subjects could. They showed me the mirror. And I do not like what I see. Chancellor Voron leaned forward. What do you propose, Emperor? I propose accepting their recommendation. Reject our application. But more, I request the Council's assistance in reforming my empire. Send oversight committees. Establish accountability measures. Help us transform from conquerors into something better. You would cede sovereignty to this council? The representative from the Terran Collective, Myra's own government, sounded shocked. I would accept guidance to prevent my empire's collapse. Without reform, the human audit project's total economic failure within 8 years. When that happens, 42 systems descend into chaos. Better a managed transformation than catastrophic collapse. Raj whispered to Mira, did we just accidentally save the galaxy from a humanitarian disaster? Or trigger it early? Nash muttered back. Chancellor Voron consulted with her fellow council members. The deliberation lasted 47 minutes, an eternity in council time. The council accepts the audit findings, Voron finally announced. The Cretan Empire's application is rejected. However, we recognize Emperor Vextheron's unprecedented request for assistance. The council will establish a reform oversight commission to work with the Empire on implementing changes. We have a condition, Vextheron said. Which is? The humans lead the commission. They've proven their integrity. More importantly, they cannot be bribed, intimidated, or corrupted by my officers. Myra's heart sank. She'd expected to return to Earth, to her quiet office in Geneva, to auditing normal corporate fraud. Not this. The Terran representative must consent, Voron said, looking at the human delegation. Ambassador Lu stood, her expression unreadable. Auditor Castellano, your recommendation? Every species in the chamber waited for her answer. Mira thought of the Vaxilar children, starving while food was stolen. The Helion engineers, executed for honesty. The Meridian teachers watching their students die in factories. She thought of Shixanael, who'd risked everything to provide evidence. She thought of the empire collapsing, taking billions down with it. I recommend we accept, she said quietly. On condition that we have full authority to implement the audit's recommendations, including prosecution of corrupt officers and gradual emancipation of enslaved populations. Agreed, Vextheron said immediately. The vote was unanimous. Mira Castellano, Senior Financial Compliance Officer, was now Reform Commissioner for the Cretan Empire. 3 months later, Mira stood in the same throne room where she'd first met Vextheron. But now it looked different. The trophy stars had been returned to their native space. The throne of destroyed ships had been disassembled. Vextheron sat on a simple seat, reviewing reports on a tablet. The first wave of prosecutions is complete, she reported. Admiral Kreshvor, General Thexalone, and 47 others have been convicted. Assets frozen and being redistributed to repair enslaved populations' infrastructure. And Zekrith? Cooperated fully. Testified against the others. Recommended for reduced sentence. 5 years administrative duty helping implement reforms. He was part of the conspiracy. He was also the one who granted us full access when he could have obstructed. Sometimes reforming criminals is more useful than punishing them. Vextheron clicked his mandibles, a laugh. You sound like an emperor. I'm an accountant. We believe in efficient resource allocation. Zekrith's expertise is a resource. Nash entered, followed by the rest of the team. The economic projections are updated. With corruption reduced and resources properly allocated to maintain the workforce, we're projecting the empire's financial stabilization in 3 years instead of collapse. And emancipation? Mira asked. Zara pulled up timelines. Gradual release over 20 years. First priority, children and elderly. Working-age populations transition to paid labor status with legal protections. It's slow, but immediate emancipation would crash the economy and harm the very people we're trying to help. Unacceptable, said a new voice. Mira turned. A Vaxxyler delegation stood in the doorway, former slaves, now freed, now citizens. 20 years is too long, their leader said. We have already lost generations to Crethean chains. I know, Mira said gently. And if there were a faster way that didn't trigger economic collapse and mass starvation, I'd take it. But the empire's economy is built on your labor. We're restructuring it to function with paid workers, but that takes time. Infrastructure. Training. Legal frameworks. So we remain slaves while you build your frameworks? No. You become paid workers with legal rights starting next month. The transition happens in stages, but it starts now. First paycheck arrives in 30 days. The Vaxxyler leader studied her. And if the empire reneges? Then the Galactic Council revokes all trading rights and imposes sanctions. Plus, I have audit authority in perpetuity. Trust me, I'll know if someone tries to cheat. A faint smile. You are very fierce for someone who works with numbers. Numbers are the fiercest things there are. They don't lie. 6 months later, Mira presented her status report to the Galactic Council. The reforms were working. Corruption was down 70%. Slave populations were receiving adequate nutrition, medical care, and education. The first wave of emancipated workers had entered the free economy. The Crethean military, while smaller, was actually functional for the first time in decades. There will be setbacks, she concluded. Corruption doesn't disappear overnight. But the trend is clear. The empire is becoming sustainable, equitable, and dare I say it, civilized. And the emperor? Chancellor Vorin asked. Learning. He's discovered that ruling through law rather than fear is actually more efficient. Fewer executions, more productivity. Who knew? Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. The council commends your work, Commissioner Castellano. Your 5-year term is approved. 5 years. Mira smiled wryly. She thought this would be a 6-week audit. Back on the Eternal Subjugation, Vextherin hosted a small dinner. Myra's team, Shixanel, now Deputy Reform Commissioner, and even Zekrith, who'd proven surprisingly good at bureaucratic reform. A toast, the Emperor said, raising a crystalline glass. To the humans who conquered my empire without firing a shot. We didn't conquer it, Mira corrected. We just showed you the receipts. In human culture, Nash added, we call that an audit. In galactic history, I suspect they'll call it a revolution. Revolution by spreadsheet, Raj laughed. The most boring and most effective kind. Later, Mira stood at her favorite viewport, watching the Vaxxyler homeworld. Lights were returning to its surface. Not just foundry fires but cities being rebuilt, schools reopening, life resuming. Shixanale joined her. Do you think we can actually do this? Transform an empire of fear into an empire of law? I think we don't have a choice. The alternative is collapse and chaos. But do you believe it's possible? Mira considered the question. An empire built on conquest, learning to govern through consent. A military designed for terror, restructuring for defense. A species that had ruled through fear for centuries, discovering that trust was more powerful. Yes, she said finally. Because I've seen the numbers. And the numbers don't lie. What do the numbers say? They say that empires built on lies always collapse. But empires built on truth, even difficult, painful truth, can last forever. Below them, the Vaxxyler homeworld turned, its lights growing brighter with each passing day. Somewhere in those lights, children were learning to read, workers were receiving fair wages, and people were remembering what freedom felt like. And in a Geneva office 5 years earlier, a CPA had accepted what seemed like a routine audit request from a terrifying empire. She'd expected to find numbers. She'd found the power to change the galaxy. One spreadsheet at a time.